Let's begin. Membez Medala 42a, top of the page. Okay, a little bit easier than yesterday. Okay, we're talking about here about a Nazir. Is a Nazir again has a chiyuv at the conclusion of his Nazirus is an obligation to shave all his hair. Okay, what happens if he shaves without using a razor, or he leaves over two hairs, meaning he's shaved everything except he has two strands, individual strands. He has not fulfilled the obligation of shaving his hair at the conclusion of his Nazirus. So Ravacha, the son of Ravika, says, we see from here that that in general, a majority is as if you have everything, midaraisa, biblically. Why is this? How do you see this? Because by Nazir, the Torah says, on the seventh day, this is talking about a Nazir Tomei, who becomes pure. He counts 7 days to become pure. On the seventh day, he shaves his head. Yigal means he shaves all of his hair, nothing left. The Torah has to say that you shave everything. But had the Torah not indicated you need to shave everything, typically a majority would suffice to count for the entirety. And the fact that Torah needs to make Nazir an exception indicates this to us. Otherwise, there would be no need to make Nazir an exception. Okay, Rav Yossi Bar Chanina has the following question. The pasuk is talking about a Nazir Tomei. Obviously, because it says B'yom Hashvi, the seventh day means he's becoming pure. He's counting 7 days to become pure. Then he becomes pure, and then he restarts his Nazirus and shave. So the Gemara says, and when he asked this question, they were snickering behind his back. What was the snicker? Michti, let's examine this. Nazir Tomei de B'tar Minolan. How do you know that a Nazir Tomei needs to use a razor? Where does a razor talking about? A razor is talking about in a scenario of a Nazir Tahar. Clearly, a Nazir Tahar and a Nazir Tomei are compared to each other. De B'tar Minolan, Nazir Tahar Yalaf. It's connected. It's learned by the fact that Nazir Tomei and Nazir Tahar are connected. Lacy Nazir Tahar, v'leilif mi Nazir Tomei. Since they're compared to each other, we can say that just like a Nazir Tomei has the rule that if there's two remaining hairs, the obligation to shave his head does not suffice. So too, the same is true with regard to a Nazir Tahar. Okay, some very interesting questions here. Abaya have the following question. Okay, now in general, we said giluach means a moving process, right? Giluach is the process that removes hair. It's unlike a process of pulling out individual strands, which is obviously not a process. So Abaya has the following question. Nazir shegilach v'shayir shtei saros. The Nazir shaved his head and leaves over two hairs. And then what happened? I guess he marked them red. He painted them blue. Yeah, since we're in Portland. Samach Roishai, and then he has his whole head shaven except for two blue hairs. Then everything grows back, and you know obviously what the two hairs are because they're blue. Okay, and then what did he do? He shaved those two blue hairs. So now the question is, Mao, did he fulfill his obligation or not? Mima akfi olay. Do we say that ultimately he shaved all his hair? He shaved all of it, and then he shaved two hairs. Now remember, in order to shave, because it's a moving process, you need to do at least two hairs. You can't shave one hair. One hair is not called shaving, which is why if you leave over one hair, you're yaitza. You need to have two hairs behind to be able to prevent you from fulfilling the obligation. In other words, you have an obligation to shave your hair. If you leave one hair behind, that's called shaving because you can't shave one hair. Pull one hair out. You can't shave it. But if you leave two hairs behind, you're missing something. So over here, he left two hairs behind, but then ultimately he did shave them. But it happens to be the rest of his hair was growing at the same time. Do we say that shaving, obviously, you have to have no hair when you're finished shaving, or no, it could be done in two separate stages, so to speak. Okay, next question. Rav has the following question. Nazir shegilach v'niach shtei saros. A Nazir shaves his head and he has 2 hairs remaining. The gilach achas v'noshra achas. He cuts one, right, and then the other one falls out. Mahu, what's the halacha? Okay, so here the Gemara proposes the resolution. Amalei Ravachim Difti Ravina, Ravachim from the town of Difti says to Ravina, gilach saira. One second, hold on. This says a different person here. In other words, since over here he cut the hairs, so why is it a question? One second. Okay, so in other words, the Gemara here is presuming that he cut both of the hairs one at a time. So the Gemara says that should be obvious, that it should suffice as a cutting. So the Gemara explains, no. What happened was one hair fell out and you have one hair left. So he shaved his whole head except for 2. One of them falls out, and now he only has one hair left, and he cuts it. Amar lei, so Ravina responds to him. Giluach ein kan, sar ein kan. There is no giluach, there's no shaving, there's no hair. So the Gemara says, Isar ein kan giluach. One second, hold on. So the Gemara says as follows: Isar ein kan. If Isar ein kan, if there's no hair, then giluach yesh kan. Then obviously he cut all his hair. So what do we care if one of them fell off? So the Gemara says hachikamer. This is what he meant to say. Af b'shasar ein kan mitzvahs giluach ein kan. Even though he has no hair left because he cut the last one and the second to last one fell off, but he did not fulfill the mitzvah of giluach. He didn't shave his head. He had 2 hairs left because one fell out, so he didn't shave it. He does not fulfill the obligation. Okay, what time is Shachris? Let's check here. Shachris is at 6:35. Okay, 6:35 means 25. Okay. So now we get to a number of interesting questions. 2, 3 questions here. Nazir chayfef umefasfis avaloi serik. The Nazir can shampoo his hair, and he can sort of lather it and move his hand through his hair. Avaloi serik, but he can't comb. The Gemara said, okay, now evidently or presumably when he's shampooing and lathering his hair, maybe hair will fall out. And the answer is the famous opinion of Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon says, Davar she'eina mischaven mutter, because it's not certain that his hair will fall out when he strokes his hair. So therefore, and he doesn't intend on pulling out his hair, so therefore, because he doesn't have an intention, then there's nothing wrong with allowing if a hair falls out, that's fine. So the Gemara says, Mani, whose opinion is this? The Gemara says, Reb Shimon, it's the opinion of Reb Shimon. That because he has no intention of pulling out hair, it is a potential consequence, but not a necessary consequence. So therefore, it's permitted. The Gemara says, Avaloi Sarik, but he can't comb. Why can't he comb? Maybe hairs will fall out, maybe not. I saw in the Rabbanon, clearly that goes in the Rabbanon that disagree with Reb Shimon, that say Davar she'eina mischaven is osur. It's prohibited.
Can you use a brush instead of a comb? Is there a difference?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
I was just curious.
We'll at least partially answer your question in a moment.
Okay.
I saw the Rabbanon, because presumably when you're using a comb, hairs potentially could fall out, just like when you comb your hair with your fingers. And therefore, the fact that it's osur, it's prohibited, indicates to us that it's a davar she'eina mischaven, and therefore it's prohibited. The Gemara says this doesn't make sense, because then you'll get Reish or Reb Shimon. The first part, it's a short mission. The first part will be Reb Shimon. But say for Rabbanon, and the end of the mission will be the Rabbanon that say davar she'eina mischaven is osur. So the Gemara says, Amar Rabba says, Kula Reb Shimon, the entire mission is Reb Shimon. Kol hasarik lahasar nimin midodolos mischaven. We're talking about combing in a way that his intention of the combing is to pull out all the loose hairs. So obviously, because there's intention here, that's the critical feature. So even though it's not a necessary outcome, but it's a wanted outcome, and therefore even if it's not necessary, even if it isn't certainly going to happen, it's still prohibited. Now, obviously, the difference between a comb and a brush then would be, again, his intentions, and if it's a necessary, if it necessarily will result in hair coming out. That's a different thing. Where Shimon agrees that if your actions necessarily have even an unwanted or an uncared for outcome, it's still considered a violation. That's called psik ratio. Basically, a guy wants a rooster head for his kid to play with. So if he chops off the head, necessarily the animal is going to die, right? So he can't say that he doesn't care to kill the animal. He just wants the head for his kid to play with. It doesn't work that way. Okay.
That's exactly the example I was going to bring up.
I remember my son was a toddler and teething and was playing with a neighbor kid, and she had a turtle, and the mothers came back into the room and the turtle was missing its head.
Wow.
Okay.
His 54th birthday is Wednesday.
The turtle?
I'll have to remember that story.
Oh my God.
That's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Get sick. The turtle did, but
Okay. Rabbi Shmuel Omer layachav ba'adama b'nei shemasheres es hasar. He should not. So we said he's allowed to use some sort of shampoo, but he can't use earth. B'nei shemasheres es hasar. So again, before modern day and age, before we had all these bottles of shampoo on the shelves, again, typically charcoal was a very common. Everyone used to use charcoal or burnt ash, and some people would use certain types of earth would also do the job. It's interesting. I was reading a book. The story didn't happen that long ago. It's like 80 years ago, and the guy was living in some far-flung place in Russia, and his shower basically consisted of using ash.
Yeah.
Apparently, does a very good job.
yeah, they make soap.
Yeah. Apparently using pure ash is even better than using soap.
Huh.
It's
Huh?
like it works very well. Anyway,
Absorb stuff.
okay. Ibailahu. Okay, so you can't use earth. Now, the more good question is, what exactly does this mean? Is it because the earth itself is going to pull out here, or is it because there is a type of earth that will pull out here? What's the difference in opinion? Again, the first opinion says that earth takes out hair, meaning that there's this type of shampoo is going to loosen the hair. Or is it because there is a type of shampoo that will pull out hair? What's the difference? When this guy's an expert in the different types of earth, and he knows this type of earth is not going to pull out his hair. So therefore, if the reason is because this earth pulls out hair, so then the guy is allowed to wash with this type of earth because this type of earth won't pull out hair. But if it's because there is a type of earth that pulls out hair, sort of it's xera. There's some earths will pull out hair, some earth will not, some soap will and some soap won't. Therefore, all soap is prohibited because of the soap that will pull out hair. If that's the case, then it doesn't make a difference if he knows his variety won't pull out hair. All soap in general will be prohibited. Okay, obviously we're talking about the earth soap, whatever. Okay. He has earth that he knows doesn't pull out here. If he says it's because this specific earth pulls out here, it's not master shopper. Then if we don't know, then it be permitted. However, if the reason is because generally speaking, there are many earth soaps that pull out here, then it would not be permitted. And the Gemara says, Teku, it's an open question. Okay, now we go back to a familiar sugya. We've seen this Gemara a couple times before. Nozir shahayashoyse yayin kol hayom. You have a Nozir who is drinking wine an entire day. Ein chayev ela achas. He is only chayev one time. Amru loy, if they warned him, they said al tishta, don't drink, and then they said 5 minutes later, don't drink again. And the guy's, it's pouring. The guy's pouring the glasses. V'hu he keeps on drinking. Chayev kol achas v'achas. So he's chayev to bring. Chayev malchus and potentially a carbon on each time that he drinks. Okay, similarly, he was taking this long haircut. He's only chayev once. They said to him, let's say they keep on warning him, don't take a haircut. So every stroke of the haircutting machine, It's another set of lavin, another set of malchus. Chayav kolachas machas, it's chayav once for each one. Similarly, third category of prohibition for nazir, hayimitame lamesim kolyim. This is the most difficult one, and this is the one the Gemara will expand on. So obviously, drinking wine, there's an endless amount of wine you could drink, right? Now, cutting hair is much more complicated. You only have a finite amount of hair in one day to cut. But what happens with regard to tumah? Tumah is the real challenge. Why is that? Because tumah, in the case of tumah, you can only become tameh once. Once you're tameh, you remain tameh until you become tahar. So how can you become tameh multiple times a day? And this is the question the Gemara will deal with. Let's say the guy was becoming tameh constantly a whole day. He's only chayav once. If they said to him, if he's working as a volunteer undertaker and he's constantly working with different bodies, then he's chayav once for each time he becomes tameh, despite the fact that his tum is already there, he's already tameh. And obviously, for anyone whose mind is working ahead, this has very practical consequences. Somebody who's a kohen today is not allowed to become tameh to dead bodies. What happens if he's already tameh? Right? It's not, it's not impossible. He was born in a hospital. It's usually good enough reason to become tameh. Obviously there's certain, in Israel, the hospital. I'm not a kohen, I'm in Israel, regular Jew. But the hospital that my wife gave birth, all three kids, there's a sign, like an illuminated light, and when the light's on, there is a body in the morgue.
Wow.
So it's a maternity hospital. So obviously, there's only a handful of stillborns basically, or neonates that passed away. And I guess presumably they probably work it's in the center of Jerusalem, so they probably work to move the bodies out pretty quickly. So there's a sign, there's a light, like if the light's on, the kohen can't go in. But what happens if the kohen was in? What happens if you were born when the light was on? Probably it's not running out of the hospital. So can you become tameh for the rest of your life now because you're already tameh? That we'll deal with in the Gemara. It's interesting. Places actually mentions it, and the answer is that you are prohibited, obviously, as everyone might imagine. Most kohanim did eventually at some point become tameh, either to their parents or they went to a hospital, and they're still prohibited to become tameh again. Okay. Top of base 42b, top of the page, first word of the line. Itmar, Amar Rabba Amar Rav Huna, Mikra Malay Dibra Akalsif. The verse is explicit. Lo yitame, he should not become tameh. Kishu Omer lo yavai. One second. Okay. So I'll just read you I'll read you the psukim first. The first pasuk is Kol Yimei Hazirei Lashem, as long as he's a nazir. Al nefesh meis le'yav. If you have a fancy Gemaras, it's on the left side of the page. Torah or Hashalom, second verse first. Beis. Kol Yimei Hazirei Lashem. All the days of his naziris. Al nefesh meis lo yavai. Yavai means by, to come, sort of an act of coming. The next verse states, to his father, his mother, his brother, his sister, he should not become tameh to them when they die. So again, there's double prohibition here. Lo yitame and lo yavai. Lo yitame means don't become tameh. Lo yavai sort of has an active component of walking into something. So he says, lo yitame k'shuomer lo yavai lahazhirei al hatuma lahazhirei al habiyah. The Torah is telling you, Torah is warning you, don't become tameh, and don't walk into a tameh room. Aval tuma v'tuma loy. However, if somebody becomes tameh twice, in other words, they touch one dead body, then they touch another dead body, that's not included because they're already tameh. Okay, what about the Mishnah? We'll get to it in a moment. For Rav Yosef Amar, Rav Yosef says, Ha'elikim, by God's name, it's a swear word. Amar Rav Huna, I feel a tuma v'tuma. I swear to you that Rav Huna said it even with regard to tuma v'tuma, meaning a nazir who becomes tameh and then becomes tameh again. He touches a second dead body. He gets malchus twice. So Amar Rav Huna, because Rav Huna says nazir shayayim basic forest. If a nazir is standing in a cemetery, he's tameh already. He touches the body he was working with and another body. Chayev. He's liable again for becoming tameh. He's in a cemetery. He's already tameh. So how could he become tummy again? El lav shmami no. Evidently, it's clearly the case. Amar Rav Huna afilu tumah v'tumah. That you can become tummy twice. In other words, even though he's already tummy, if he does an act that would otherwise cause a new level of tumah, he's chayev twice. Esvi Abaya. Abaya is the following question: if you have a kohen who's carrying a dead body, so he's carrying the body he's working with, and then he goes and touches another body. And then he touches another body. I would think he'd become chayev. He would be chayev malchus. In other words, a kohen is prohibited to become tummy, and therefore, if he's carrying his own dead body, now remember, a kohen is allowed to become tummy to his parents. Seven tumas, right? There's 2 up, 2 down, 2 to the 1 to the right, 1 to the left, and his wife. And obviously the exception of his sister would be his sister before she gets married, or if she's divorced without kids. Okay. So again, so kohen is already tummy. Let's say with in permitted fashion. So he's working with his father's deceased body, and then he touches some other body. I would think he's chayev. He shouldn't make chayil. He shouldn't and he says he shouldn't profane his status as a kohen. And therefore, b'misha enim echol, we're talking about somebody who isn't already profaned by becoming tummy, by being impure. He's already impure, so therefore he can't be chayev twice. Okay, 1 second. So Abaya says, if that's the case, then why in the scenario of Nazir is it any different? If a kohen becomes tummy, if a kohen who's already tummy is not chayev for becoming tummy again, why is the Nazir different? Okay. Amar lo, so they responded to Abaye and said, hold on a second. The mission should be difficult because the mission makes the same argument in effect. The mission we just saw, the mission says you can become tummy twice. You can't, there's no such thing as becoming tummy twice. You can be chayev for becoming tummy twice. Even though you can't become tummy twice, you can only become tummy once. Then if you become pure, you can become tummy again. But in one cycle, you're already mechul, you're already tummy. You can't make a guy who's tummy can't become tummy twice. It's not how you mitnul amazing call you. I'm ene chayev alachas. If he was touching dead people the whole day, he's only chayev once. Amrulay al titma. If they kept on warning him for each dead body, chayev alachas v'achas. He's chayev for each one. V'amai, why? Hamitma v'kom. He's already tummy. Elakash adodi. So Gemara says, okay, you're right, fine. So the Mishnah clearly says that a Nazir could become tummy twice by touching for each dead body is another act of prohibition. So the Gemara says, okay, so it's difficult, Elakash adodi, but then so we have a contradiction here. Why in the scenario of kohen, he's carrying his parents' body, he touches another dead body, nothing, another corpse, no problem. Does not incur any violation. But in the scenario of a Nazir who's touching many corpses, he is chayav for each one. Why is it different? Okay, so Gemara says like kasha, it's not difficult. Kan b'chiburin, kan shaloi b'chiburin. Very simple.
Never difficult. Never difficult.
The scenario of Kayin is a scenario where the guy was holding the casket of his father, or the mito, the bed, the corpse of his father. And now, while he's holding one corpse, he touches another corpse. That's considered sort of the same tumah. Whereas the scenario of Nazir is talking about where he picked up one corpse. He was an undertaker, so he dealt with one corpse, and then he started dealing with the second corpse. As long as he's not attached to the first corpse, then the second one becomes tummy. Then he becomes liable for becoming tummy for each following subsequent corpse. So the idea is that you have to sort of separate the tumah. It has to be an act where he's currently not engaged in becoming tummy because he's not in a dead room with a dead body. He's not touching a dead body, So therefore, in that case, in that scenario, if he touches a dead body, he gets malchus again. But if he's engaged still in the first tumah because he's still connected to it, he's holding it, he's touching it, then he does not incur malchus for a second violation. Okay. This Gemara wants to detail a little bit more on this subject of chiburin.
You say from the second time, you have to run around with a corpse on your shoulder.
Yeah.
He's heavy, he's my father.
Give me a moment here.
Hey,
Okay, so the Gemara wants to know Tumah bechiburin deraisa. What's the status of, in general, of this concept, Tumah bechiburin, where somebody is touching a dead body? We'll explain this in a moment. Ha'amar of Yitzchak bar Yosef, Amar of Yanai. Okay, 1 second. So the Gemara is saying if you're touching a dead body and then you become tummy again, then you don't get malchus for that second touching of another body. So Gemara wants to know what's the status of tumah bechiburin. In other words, what biblical significance does it have if you're still touching a corpse? So the Gemara gives a slightly different example, and we'll explain this in a moment. Ha'amar of Yitzchak bar Yosef Amar of Yanai le'amar tumah bechiburin el letruma b'kotchim avla nazer v'ayis pesach loy. So we have a concept of tumah bechiburin. Let's say you have a fellow, it's customary that the children, in most places, at least in Jerusalem, for some reason they don't do it. It's not clear why. The children typically carry their parents' caskets. Let's say so they're holding the casket, they're first degree tumah, right? And somebody goes ahead and touches them while they're holding the casket. So what status of tumah do they have?
Second
Do
degree.
they have, is it second degree? Or do we say since they're still connected they're still holding the casket, it's first degree? So the Gemara says we treat it like first degree, except but only rabbinically. We'll change the scenario in just a moment, so don't take it as firm yet. So what's going on? So okay. So obviously, if somebody they're bringing carbon pesach is only brought in a scenario of where you're tahar. If you become tamei, you cannot bring a carbon pesach. Now here we have a problem. If we give you a rabbinical level of tumah, then what's going to happen? Then we're going to stop you from bringing a pesach. Which actually, if you're able to bring a pesach because you're tahar and you're in the environment, you can bring a pesach. Namely, you're in the temple and you don't bring a pesach, you incur a severe violation of kares. So we're sort of stuck here. Which penalty do we give you tumah and then we stop you from bringing the pesach and you get kares for not bringing korban pesach? So in that case, we say no, there's no kares. Similarly, for a nazir who becomes tamei through chiburin, we say also he doesn't become tamei. He zero, not even rabbinically, because if we treat it rabbinically, we're going to make him bringing all these karbanis, and there's no reason for him to bring a carbon. So we're not going to tell him to bring a carbon in the Beis HaMikdash when the carbon is really chulin, because he's not really tamei. But with regard to eating truma and kachim, we'd say no, you're a full-fledged tumah. You need the whole tumah, tahara process. Okay, this clearly indicates that tumah bechiburin is derabanan. The amar deraisa ma'ishna. Why would there be a difference between Pesach and everything else? Because if it's tumah deraisa, then for korban Pesach you don't have to bring a Pesach. If the guy is tamei, by the way, tumas meis, technically speaking, you can walk into the temple. You just can't walk into there's different levels, but there's a lot of parts of the temple that you could walk in even if you're tamei meis. Now, I'm not trying to justify anyone going on the Temple Mount today. You shouldn't do it, and there's no reason. But that being said, there's other reasons why you shouldn't. But that being said, tumas meis is not a very significant problem. Now, it is significant because you still wouldn't be able to go. You'd only be able to walk in about 3 feet in any direction, because anything more than that, we don't really know exactly where the inner parts of the temple were on the modern day Temple Mount. Although don't go in anyway. It's still not a good idea. But tumas meis would allow you to go. So if you have a guy who's in the Chaver Kedisha and became tamei erev Pesach, and he just wants to go watch, he's welcome to. He can go in and watch from a distance because he can't go in all the way, but he has no kares for not bringing korban Pesach. He can't bring a korban Pesach. There's nothing wrong with that. Obviously, he brings a Pesach Sheni in second round. Okay. But obviously over here, if we're making a difference, obviously the Truma is not deraisa. So Gemara says no. Kan b'chiburi adam, kan b'chiburi adam b'adam, kan b'chiburi adam b'meis. Okay, what does this mean? So actually, if you have the guy who's carrying the casket, right, and a person touches them, that person's tamei midaraisa. That's tumah deraisa. If a Nazir does it, he's chayav malchus, even though he didn't touch the mace. He touched a person holding a mace. However, let's say he touches a person that's touching a person that's holding the body. In that case, that's derabanan.
Okay.
Got it? So in other words, if you touch somebody who's holding a dead body, that's first degree tumah deraisa. You become an avatumah. That's prohibited for Nazir. In that case, you'd be exempt from bringing a Korban Pesach. If you're Kayin, you get malchus for that as well. However, if you touch that person who's touching another person who's holding the body, that is tumah derabanan, and there they made a difference between whether it's whether you want the privileges of tahara, of purity, meaning because you want to eat kachim or truma, or if it's necessary for you to be tahar because you want to bring in Korban Pesach or you're a Nazir, presumably Kayin as well.
You remain tahar.
So you remain tahar in that scenario, in sort of the third degree of live tumah contact.
Wow.
Which is sort of ironic.
You're making-
So if you're at the end of the Congo line, you're fine.
Okay.
But if you're the front,
Okay.
You just complete an electric pivot, right? The first one is quicker to ground, the next one is.
Okay. We'll stop here. So tomorrow we'll talk about the second half. So today we spoke about how to become tamei multiple times. Tomorrow we'll begin by discussing the second component, which is bia. Bia means to go into tumah. Typically that means you go into a house that has tumah in it. Tumah of a dead body. Tumah of a dead body has what's called tumas mace, tumas oil, which means we see the house sort of as filled with tumah. And then the question is it possible to violate tumas again? So there's two ways to become tamei in a house. Number one is to if you put your finger in the house, it's as if you touch the tumah, because as if the house is filled with a substance called tumah. So now the question is, how do you violate both at the same time? How do you become tamei? By touching and by walking inside at the same time, because when you walk inside, you're always touching first, and once you're touching a second dead body, so to speak. So you didn't walk into the tummy house. You walked into the tummy house carrying a dead body. You're only chayav once then, right? So how would it be possible to enter a dead body by touching it and by being present at the same time? If anyone has any guesses, try today.
It's just totally unrelated, sort of. We read a series of mysteries that are centered on Navajo policemen. Some people may know what it is. And the Navajo have this concept of you must photo. If you've been inside the same building where there's a dead person, then you have to go through a purification ritual.
Interesting.
So maybe the Mormons are right.
Okay.
About that.
Okay, have a great day. Tomorrow we continue. I believe tomorrow is also 6:45. What time is tomorrow?
They said